Hello everybody and welcome to this Unity tutorial on how to make a trivia system. I've themed this one after Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but any trivia game will work with this as long as it's a question followed by a set number of answers. In this one we have 4 answers with one question being asked, and with this we're going to have it set up so that way we can ask as many questions as we want. I'm not going to have it show that part, but the question itself. So any system you want to wrap this into, this should be able to be added to. So we want to make sure that first we have, of course, our questions. On each one of these questions, we made them a button, and right now they don't do anything. They just will flash the highlighted color once I put the mouse over them, or the selected color if I'm using the arrow keys or the controller, and the pressed color will be the gray when I click on it. But we're going to want to start off with a script, and I have these scripts on another screen here. I'm going to be pasting in some code, and we're going to go over that. So we want to have the first script be the QuestionData. And this is going to be a scriptable object where we're going to just have all of the parts that we need for our questions. In this example, we're going to have, let me just paste in this class here. First, we're just going to get rid of start and update. And we don't want this to be mono behavior. Instead, this is going to be scriptable object, which in this case, I'm just going to paste right in over this. So we're going to have the question itself, and that's going to go inside of our top box. That's going to be the question text. We're going to have the category, and that's going to be that little box above that says category, just the text there. And this last one is going to be our answers. I'm going to save this script changes. And we see this tooltip here, so the correct answer should always be listed first. So the way that I'm setting this up is the correct answer will always go inside of the one that A will have, but we're going to then randomize which position these are in, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But with this here, our question data, now that we've added this, along with one more thing that I forgot to show on here, we need to be able to create these scriptable objects. So to do that, right above our script name, we're going to include create asset menu, and we need to give it a file name. In this case, I'm giving it question. And then the menu name, I'm just using scriptable object / question. So we can really know it's a scriptable object, and the question matches what it is, in this case, questions. And I'm setting the order to 1. So if you had more of these, you could set which order they're in. I'm going to save that again. And now when the scripts reload, I can go over here and I'm going to be putting all of these inside of the resource folder, resources, and then questions. And we see that there's already one in here. But if I go to create, the top here, we see scriptable objects and then we have a question. And once I create one of those, I could just say test. And we see that at the top, now we have question, test with a question mark, category, test, and then we have our answers. So we can add 4 of them. We can click the button here to add 1, or we could just click in this box and change it to 4 to add 4 at once. So I'm going to say correct answer, because we know the first one should be a correct answer based on the format I chose. And then we're going to say wrong 1, wrong 2, and wrong 3. So this would be any question that you want. If you wanted more answers in here, you would need more boxes on screen. But this should be able to fit a certain number of them that you're looking for. Going back here, we're going to need another script, and this next one, it's going to make it so that our answer buttons are going to have the information that they need to be set up. Right now they just say answer text. We're not going to be changing A, B, C, or D. We're going to be changing just the text inside of there. And I'm using Text Mesh Pro. If I open up one of these buttons here, we see the letter, and then the answer text. And the answer text, I just have it set to auto size, so that way it'll automatically adjust depending on how many letters are in here. Just so that way I don't need to worry too much about what size I'm making the actual text in there. It's going to adjust for me. So let's go back to our scripts folder. And this next script we're going to say is AnswerButton. So on our question data, we're going to need to add a using TM Pro for me because I'm using Text Mesh Pro. If you're not, you don't need to add that. We're going to add a couple fields here. So I'm going to take away our start and update. This is just going to have information passed to it, and it's also going to have a function when we click on it. So to start off, we want to know if this button is the button that is the correct answer, because once we randomize those, it's going to change from the first one. So we're not always going to know. This is going to be passed in from a different script. So the next field we have is just the answer text that it's going to be changing on screen. The first function I've brought in here is set answer text. So it's going to get text from another script, and then it's going to be told what that text should be. And that's going to be setting that. We also need another function in here to then set, since we have it a private field, we wanted to set the is correct Boolean, and we're just giving it a new Boolean value, and it's being set to that new value. If you made these public, you could leave it like that. I like to make things private when I don't need them public. And the last thing we're going to need in the script is we're going to need our onClick function. So whenever we click on this button, we just want to check, is this correct? And I'm having it debug the words correct answer for correct and wrong answer for wrong answer. And this is where you would put your logic into, say, a scoring system or whatever else you would want in here. We're just going to use the debug to see that they're working. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back here. Now, I made each of these buttons from one prefab. So I'm going to be able to just go into my assets, into the prefab, open up my answer box, and on here, I can scroll down and I'm just going to add a component, answer button. Let me open up that, and we see that there is the answer text, which if I go up here, we see answer text, drag and drop that right in. And we also have our onClick function. If we don't set this, it won't do anything. We'll have all the scripts set up, but it won't do anything. So the object we're looking for is our answer button script, and the function we're looking for is our onClick under answer button. With that set up, we can hit save, we can go back, and now all of these should have it on it. We're going to see A has that set up, B has it set up, and so on. So those two scripts only say that here's the information that's going to be inside of our question, and then this one is going to be how do our buttons interact with that. So now we need one that's going to actually select which questions we're going to be using. So in this one, I called it QuestionSetup, which I've clicked off of it after I made it. So let me just delete that one. I could rename it, but I have to rename 2 spots, and I'm just going to recreate it. And we called it QuestionSetup. Opening up this script, we're going to need a couple different things in here. Just like our first one, or second one rather, we're going to need TextMesh Pro. And I'm going to paste these in small sections. So I'm going to leave start and update for now. And at the top, we're going to add a serialized field for our list of question data. So this is going to be our actual questions. Now, when I say question, it's not going to be just the question string. It's going to be all of this as one object. It's our scriptable object that we're using. That's why it matches the question data name and not just the field name of string. We're also going to have the one of them called current question. So that way we're going to keep track of which question we're currently on, and we're going to use that to get all the data from it without having to select it from the list multiple times. And then also you're going to see how we're going to make it so that way this won't repeat questions while we're in the game. It will repeat if you restart the game, but while you're in the same session, it won't repeat. The next few ones, it's going to be what we're going to be actually setting up. In this case, our question text, our category text, and our answer buttons. So these are both TextMesh Pro UGUIs, and that's for our text, but then answer button for our answer buttons. And you're going to notice this is an array. So we're going to have multiple of these. The last thing we're going to need here is a int for correct answer choice. Since they're going to be moving around, we need to keep track of which one of these is going to be our correct answer. And we'll see that in just a moment. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these things are being set up on awake. No real particular reason for that other than I want to separate when I'm putting the values on screen into start, or you could put it in a different function depending on when it's starting in your game. But I'm going to put this into awake, so when this scene loads, it's going to get all the question assets. So if we have get question assets inside of here, we're going to have to make that function. So I'm going to come down beneath update here, and I'm going to add that function. So in this one, we're going to say our questions, which matches our list of question data up there. And we're going to set this to a new list. So normally you would use resources.loadAll. And in this case, I'm telling it I want them to only find question data. And then I want it inside of this path, questions. So the resources means it's going to load from our resources folder, which we see here. That's why I put them in this folder. And then from that folder, I added questions, and that's going to be the path where it's going to put them. And then to make this a list, because this is an array, this part from resources to question, that's an array. So to make it into a list, we could just do new list and then give it inside of our arguments of the function, we can give it the array. So that's all we need in order to load in all of those questions. And now we're going to go back to our start function, and I'm going to add in the other functions that we're going to want it to do. So the first thing we're going to want it to do is select a new question. So to select a new question, we're going to add a new function down here. And we're going to say, get a random number for which question we're going to pick from our list. So just getting a random number index from a random range from 0 to the number of questions we have. In this case, questions.count, since it's a list. If you have an array, it would be length. Then we're going to set that question to the one that we picked. So our current question is being set to questions with an index of that random question index. After that, we have our questions, and we're going to remove that same one that we just picked. So we're putting it into this current question, and then we're removing that one from the list. So that way, if we have 5 questions and we pick the third one, we're removing that third one from the list. So that way, next time when we pick from that list, it's not going to be able to choose that one since we removed it. That's going to stop it from repeating until the game is restarted. Since these aren't going to go away once we remove them, they're going to still be there. They're just not in this list. So when you restart the game or play and stop or whatever you do, it's going to bring it back into that list. On this first one, it's going to load it in here. So after that, we have set question values, and that's where we want it to show on the screen that we have the text showing up. So that function here, we have question text.text equals our current question.question. So we have our question text is our question, and we have our category then afterward is being set to our category, which is category text.text equals current question.category. So we're using that current question that we set here, and we're just taking the information out of it. And all of this information is from our question data right here. We have our question and we have our category. So the last thing we haven't used is our answers. We'll see that next. Just zoom in here to make sure this is big enough. So we see that set answer values is the last one. So I'm just going to scroll down here, and I'm going to paste this one in as is, but there's going to be a function inside of it. So for setting our question values, the first thing we're going to do is set random orders for our questions. So we see we have this function here for randomize answers. So we're going to have to add that. It's going to be this. So we have a list of string being returned, and it's going to be randomized answers, the same name, and it's being passed a list I'm calling original list. We're having a Boolean value for chosen answer, correct answer chosen, and that's going to be false. Now remember what I said at the very beginning, in our question data, the correct answer should be listed first. That's where this comes into play. Back in our question data, right here is where it's going to come into play, but we'll get there in a sec. So we're going to iterate through this list of all of the answer buttons, because if we use the original list or the new list is going to be empty, and original list, we're going to be removing them so we make sure we don't have any repeats. So that's why we're using answer buttons, so we know how many answers we're choosing and not using these lists as a length, because otherwise it's going to shorten or already be 0 and it won't do anything. So first thing we're doing is just getting a random number between 0 and the original list.count. So that way we know how many choices we have left to choose from. And once we do, we're saying, hey, is that random number 0? Because that's going to be the correct answer. But since we can have multiple times be 0, it's just the first time we want to make sure that it's the correct answer. So that's why we have this Boolean for correct answer chosen. So if this is the first time we're getting a 0, our correct answer choice is going to be whichever iteration of our for loop we're on. And then also we're setting our correct answer chosen to true. That's going to stop it from choosing this again and setting our correct answer to multiple values. After that, we're going to add that one to our new list, and then we're going to remove it from the original list. Once it's run through that list, in this case 4 times for our 4 buttons, we're just going to return that new randomized list. Which brings us back here. And then we just need to set up the answer buttons. So we're just going to say for every one of our answer buttons from 0 to our length of the answer buttons. First thing we want is this one a correct answer? We're going to initialize that as false, so that way we only change it to true if we see that same value. So that's where we see right here. If I spelled it wrong, if it is the correct answer, set the bool to true. So we're checking I is double equal to, or comparing it to, our correct answer choice. If it is, we're setting it to true. Then all we need to do is, well, pass along those values, which if we remember back here, we have set is correct and set answer text, which we see here. Set is correct to our value for is correct, false if it didn't match, true if it did. And then we're also giving it set answer text to answers and the one that we're currently on. And with that, that's going to randomize our list with this randomize answers, and it's going to set the values here. So we see that inside of start, we have those three things that are setting it all up. And we actually don't need update. Looks like I left it there for some reason. Either way. So we're going to save all of this. We're going to go back to Unity. And inside of here, we're going to just put these functions where they belong. I'm going to put them on our question box. So I'm going to say this should be QuestionSetup. And we see we have our questions. That's going to be loaded in. I'm leaving it here as a serialized field so that way we can view them while in game just for debugging purposes. Our question text, that's going to be under our question box. Question text, I have it here. Now we need the category text. I put the category underneath that box, so we have our category text. And then we have our answer buttons. These are the 4 of them. So I'm going to lock this, which we could also right-click and go into properties. That'll just open up this separate window, which actually I'll keep it with that one. I'll uncheck that for locking it. So now with this unlocked, I can move this around anywhere I want. I'm going to leave it here for now. And I'm going to just select our 4 answers boxes and drop them right into answer buttons. So now we see answer box, A, B, C, D, all the way down. And our correct answer choice is also being set by the script, but I'm just leaving it here for debugging purposes so we could see what that value it's chosen is. So with all of that, I'm going to close that properties window that we brought up. I'm going to save this. And did we forget to add a script to anything? This is on the buttons, this is our data, and then this is on the setup. So with all of that, we should be able to press play. And let's see if we're able to see a question show up in there. And we do. We see test with the question mark. We see wrong 2, wrong 3, wrong 1. These are not in the order that we gave it, so our randomize seems to be working. If I go back here, we see wrong 1, 2, and 3, so it's not in the same order. Correct answer happened to pick the same one. Now let's see if our debug line works when we click on these. Now we see 2 is wrong, C is wrong, and D is wrong. And if we press A, we see the correct answer. Now we always want to test it multiple times because it could have been a fluke that it worked the first time. So we just want to make sure we test a bunch of values here. We see it picked the same question. So if it doesn't always consider A right. And we see that the answers so far seem like it's working flawlessly. Press play one more time, see if we can't get it to load that other question. Answers still seem to be working. And it's always grabbing just this question. So I want to double check in my question box. We see here questions. It does have the other one as a value. It just happens to be not choosing it. I see it in the list that it's being added to. And that's why I wanted it there, because without multiple ones here, sometimes it could seem like it's not doing it. If I delete this one, we should see that it picks the other one. There we go. Which we see it just has the same answers. It just has question in all caps instead of having a question mark. So I also want to show you an easier way that we can get these questions to show up. So in order to do this, I'm going to use a CSV file, which I've already got one here. So it's just Excel, and at the very end, just save it as a .csv. I believe it's going to say, let me just pop it up, CSVUTF-8, comma delimited. That's going to be the important part, comma delimited. So we see here that I just have question category, a correct answer, a wrong 1, a wrong 2, and a wrong 3. I say, what is a sandwich? It's under the food category. Ham and cheese is the correct answer. Ice cream, cake, and water are not correct answers. So with this CSV file, I'll leave this up for a sec. But inside of here, we're going to have it so Unity is able to grab the values from that CSV file and automatically make those scriptable objects using the data that we gave it. So we need an editor folder since this is going to need a Unity editor. Since this is going to be adding in Unity editor. So inside of this folder, I have another folder for CSVs in case there were multiple, but I'm going to add a C# script here. And this one is going to be CSV2. I'm going to do SO for scriptable object. So inside of here, we're actually going to change out the top here. We're going to be using Unity Engine, Unity Editor, and System.io. The first thing I'm going to want to get is a question CSV path. So this is just going to be the path from the assets folder to where I saved it. So in this case, under editor, then CSVs, and then it's going to be called question.csv. We're also going to need the number of answers. This is just going to be so we don't have magic numbers in our script later on. And then we also need to make sure that this has none of these. We don't need any of these. And we also don't need mono behavior for this one. So we're just going to remove that. So we're going to need a menu item to know where we're going to have to be able to select this. I'm just going to call it utilities and generate questions. After this, we're going to actually have our function, which I'm going to paste in the whole thing. So it's going to be a bit long, but we'll go through it. So we're going to start at the top here. So I'm calling it generate. In this case, I had phrases. I'm going to rename this to questions. There we go. We're going to have it generate questions. I did reuse this script from another project I was working on where it was phrases. So I'm having a debug log just to make sure that it is running this, called just saying generated phrases, or questions in this case. So we want to load in all of the strings from that file, or all of the lines as strings. So we have file.readAllLines, and it's application data path. So that's going to bring us to our asset folder. And then from there, we're adding to it our question CSV path. That's why this is after our asset folder, which we see here, we have assets, and then we have the file path we're giving it. So this is going to give us wherever this is saved on this computer, whichever computer it is, and then it's going to add in the specific path we added this to. After that, we're doing a for each loop. So we're going to look through all of the strings, which we're just calling S, in all of the lines we just loaded in, and then we're going to split that data. So we're saying that we have an array of strings from the string being split. Now it's reading in all of them per line. So if we remember here, this will become one string. Split is going to bring it so that way at the commas, it's going to separate them. So we're just separating it into our different columns here. And we see that our first column, which I've written out here, this is the format I'm using, just that way it was in here as well. The first one is our question. So we need to make a new question data. I'm just calling it question data as well. And it's going to be scriptable object.create instance. And it's question data. So we're going to set the question because now we need to go inside of this script and we need to set up these values that we gave it. We need to set question and category and answers. And we're just doing them in the same order. Our question is going to be our first selection in that split data. So that's our 0 in the array, 0 index. After that, we're setting our category to number 1, which is the second value in that array. Then we're initializing our array of answers just to make sure that we have an array of length 4. So we have our question data.answers, and we're setting it equal to a new string with a length of 4. We're going to iterate through those 4 in a for loop, starting at 0, going through the number of answers. That's why we didn't want a magic number earlier. That's where we got number of answers. We're using it here. And then for each one of these, it's just going to be our question data.answers, whichever one we're on, 0 through 4 in this case. And we're going to say that data, which is actually before 4, so 0 through 3. So our split data, and we're adding 2. We're doing 2 plus whatever number we're on. So the reason we're doing that is our first 2 are already accounted for, so we're starting here. And because of the way arrays work, our column A in this case will be 0, 1, and then 2. So we're saying start here. And because we're starting at 0 with I, that's going to be 2 plus 0, that's going to be 2. And then from then, it's just going to be the next column over, and that's going to keep getting us all the way across. In this case, only these 4. After that, we want to make sure we give it a file name. Now, there's some characters that won't work in strings. It'll give you an error if you try to do it. If you see that error, make sure that you're not using a character that's not allowed in the name. In this case, I have question marks. And that's because our questions have question marks in them. So we see this one, if I let that be the file name, it would return an error and not let me use it. So I'm saying, if it contains a question mark, I'm going to set the name of this question data object to the same name as the question, but I'm going to remove the index of the question mark. And you could do this for any other thing that you need to make sure that it doesn't have a name. I think quotations are one of them, and there's a couple other things. If you have an error with this part, double check that you're using only characters that are allowed inside of names for files. After that, I'm just double checking that, say I didn't include the question mark, like this first one here. There's no question mark in there, and it might try to set it to nothing, because this only does something if it finds a question mark. So we want to make sure if it doesn't find anything, it doesn't change anything. So we're just bringing in the question as is. After that, we're saving this to the resources folder by doing asset database.createAsset. We're giving it the object we just created, and I'm using this $sign here to make sure that we can add in this value here without having to concatenate the strings by doing plus that name and all the other stuff. So it's just a way to drop it in there quicker. We have our assets, and then we're going into resources and then questions. And that's going to be this folder here, our resources and our questions. It's going to bring it into here. So if I delete this here, we have nothing inside of here. And the last thing outside of this, because all of this was in a for each, the last thing we need to do is save our assets. So with all of that, I'm going to save this file, go back to Unity and let it load for a sec. We see there are nothing inside of our questions. If I look inside of our editor, here's where we have this script, which I'm going to include a comment on that one to make sure it goes inside of the editor folder when it's in the GitHub, which there's going to be a link in the description. And we have our CSV folder inside of there with our question CSV. So what this did was at the top, we have this new utilities, and you could have named this anything you wanted. In this case, I named utilities, then generate questions. If I click on this, we see I got an error. So let's take a look at what that was. It says there is an error with this path. Let's see what this could have been. Questions.csv. Oh, let's take a closer look at that error. Sharing violation. So the reason that there was a sharing violation is I still have this open. It can't be opened by me, and then Unity can't open it as well. It can't be opened twice. So I'm just going to not save my changes since I don't believe I made any that made any difference anyway. And then now I'm going to clear that and go to utilities and generate questions again. And we see this time it just says generated questions, so it should have worked. So if we go to assets and we go to resources, then questions, we see there's 2 questions here. And this question category, correct answer 1, 2, and 3. And then what is a sandwich? Under food category, ham and cheese, ice cream, cake, and water. If we go back to our CSV file, which if I just click on it here, we see those values up here. They're in the same order. So it generated those questions. And if we double check their name, the name of this file is question. And this one is what is a sandwich with no question mark. So it was able to generate those. And then now if I just press play, since it's loading them in from that file without any other assistance from me, it was able to pick the question. Let's press play a couple times here and see if we can get it to pick the other one. There we go. And we see it was able to pick either of the questions. And it is random, so it could be biased or picking one for a little while, but it should statistically pick the other one eventually. And then also, if you plug this into a system where you are making multiple questions, you would just need to have it call the function for select new question whenever you wanted the new question, and that's already set up to randomize all of the values. And then on here, you would just have to tie this to, well, which one's the correct answer? I picked this one, I should get maybe a point or something. It should make a noise as well when you click on it, depending on whatever you're doing with the game. But this is how you could set all of this up and be able to change it very quickly using a CSV file, either Excel or whatever spreadsheet software you want to use. And that way it's able to import, load automatically, and the only thing you have to do is come up with your questions. So all of this is going to be on a GitHub. I'm going to have a link in the description for that below. So I hope you learned something from this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.